Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Empowered Conversations, where I have amazing conversations with extraordinary people who are doing beautiful things out in the world in service to others. And today, that is the epitome of what my guest is putting out in the world. Her name is Tanya Horne. And she is a mother of three beautiful adult children and Gigi to her fabulous granddaughter, Mila. She is a self-appointed mental health advocate, taking her lived experiences of trauma and using it to cause important conversations, creating authentic connections. One of the places she does outreach is as a street therapist at the Sit Down, Stand Up Comedy Stand. She is an award-winning speaker, a published author, a body positivity diversity spokesperson, a facilitator, and a coach. This local comedian took to the streets just after COVID to bring herself out of isolation while hoping to help others bring more joy and kindness into their lives through using comedy as a tool to create opportunities for healing through humor. Ha ha! Her love for people and her ability to meet people where they are at is a powerful gift to withhold. Tanya utilizes her vulnerability as a superpower. I'm like getting emotional. Connecting with others and showing up as all of who she is. She is creating her great life, transitioning from a single parent, empty nester with a passionless job and little knowledge about how she was going to make it work, to actualizing her life's dreams and being center stage of her own life. Everybody, help me in welcoming Miss Tanya Horne. What is up, girl?
Hello.
Oh my God, you and I were like emotional before we even came on here. Yeah, I got the tissues today.
I can't cry.
Guys, get your tissues today. Get your tissues. We got Siobhan and Mabe Medwin watching. Hello, ladies, and hello, everyone. And Carol Boston, welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining. This is going to be an empowered conversation faux show. All right, deep breath.
Good idea.
So, Tanya, like I say, I always like to get deep and real and just put it out there in the very beginning of the show. Yeah, girl. And my first question is what life happenings, life experiences, epiphanies, revelations led you to where it is that you are today, this beautiful way in which you're showing up in the world and what you're doing for others? What all helped create this for you?
Well, so what I'm understanding is this is a mini series. It's going to be on for weeks and weeks and weeks.
Absolutely.
Now, I don't know. We'll cut it. But let me, cut to the chase. Abuse. Sadly, abuse, sexual, mental, physical abuse. Lots of abuse in my family history. I'm currently in school to become a registered therapist, and we're doing geneograms. And I'm studying my history, and I'm looking at it going, wow, the compound fractures of all of the things that have been passed down is pretty insane. So it was about 18 years ago. My son came to me, disclosed he was being abused. I had to go and then drive my then husband to the police station and have him arrested. And life, as you can imagine, obliterated and shattered apart. And I remember thinking, I was watching it happen from outside my body. So it was like this crazy dreamlike state. And it was like, okay, so now you know, what are you going to do about it? And so immediately protecting my children, of course, was my first go-to. And it isn't everyone's first go-to. I've learned. Of course, in the immediacy of all of that, it was like, well, this is really simple. You did this, you choice and consequence. Now you have to pay the consequence of that. And the system isn't set up like that, unfortunately. So, but on my behalf, I guess there's something in me that decidedly understood that the buck stops here.
Right.
There is no more abuse past here. I'm a cycle breaker. And I didn't know it in that moment the way that I know it now, intimately. But there was something that rose up inside of me, and I thought, no, this is not going to be our story.
Right.
I'm going to write a different story. And so going home and being in service to my children, who were 6, 8, and 14 at the time, and really understanding not much because I was deeply depressed. My world had shattered. I didn't know if I was coming or going. There were moments, many moments, where I couldn't even lift my head off the pillow. And I remember thinking, okay, so what do you need to do every day? And at that point in time, the only thing that, I mean, it was like darkness had set in, right? So all I could see was this very narrow part right in front of me. And it was in dedication to knowing that my kids needed me to stand up and really take care of the situation because they were children and didn't have the wherewithal to do that themselves.
Right.
And I could feel sorry for myself to a degree, but it was my job. It was my duty, and I was called into action. And the only thing that I knew how to do, Stephanie, at that point in time was to feed them. So it was like, okay, so the only place I can go is the grocery store because I can't leave my house right now. It's just too scary out there in the world. I didn't trust anybody, but I could make sure that they had their 3 meals a day and make sure that they were housed. So in that has been born this 20-year tradition now where we still eat all of our meals around the table as a family. We connect in a way that I think has been days gone by for most, where they're eating on the run or they're eating at their desk or they're eating in front of the television, everybody. So that right there started this sort of infrastructure of how to rebuild a life. And so from that point in time, not easy going through it. Of course, 18 years later, it's kind of like, oh, well, you know, it was fine. It wasn't fine. It was excruciatingly painful. It was hard and difficult every single day. And there were challenges. You know, all of a sudden I'm a single parent in a situation where I don't have options otherwise. I'm in a small town. I'm isolated. I'm cut off from my family. And I have a teenager who's now challenging me at every possible moment. I'm like,
right. It's like whatever could be was right there on you.
Completely. And yet we all made it through. And now, you know, my youngest daughter is 24, my middle daughter is 26, and my son just turned 31. And, you know, I'm reminded on Mother's Day when they write me in their card or they send me a message and say, you know, thank you. Thank you for being in service to everything that I needed as a child. And so that I'm not a statistic at this point in time, or I'm a statistic, just a positive one, which is unheard of. You know, I remember when I took my ex-husband to the police station, you know, I said, I'm not doing this for you. You do it yourself. And so I stood behind him while he turned himself in, but I wasn't willing to do the work for him. So I'm not doing his heavy lifting. It's not mine to do. And the police officer was just so dumbfounded. He said, this is not how this happens. I've been here 30 years. I've never seen, you know, someone walk up to the door. We usually have to chase or there's this protection that happens and everything else. And I was like, it seemed like simple math to me. 1 + 1 = 2.
Thank you. Yes.
Here we are. And shitty that you didn't deal with your own. Sorry, I swear. I hope.
Girl, you could.
Okay.
This is not a show for children.
Okay, good.
We're not going to be on Sesame Street. We're good.
Good. Oh, I lost my train of thought.
You were at the station and they were saying that this just doesn't happen like that.
Right. And so, you know, going into not understanding how the system actually works, which it was so strange to me that they would then give him back to me. So they kept him for a couple of hours. They took me in a police car and rode me around and started grilling me and stuff like that. I'm like, listen, I found out at 10 o'clock this morning. I have no idea what's going on other than what I know. I haven't been able to ask my kids, you know, as much information as I'd like. I just know that I have a level of responsibility here. And here he is. You take him, you figure it out. And the system isn't set up for that. So when they gave him back to me, I said, I'm going back to my children. They said, well, we can't really tell you what to do. And I was like, this is so messed up.
That's crazy. So he
So
admits.
crazy.
So was it sexual or
Yes. Yeah.
okay? And so he's admitting I'm a fucking pedophile,
Mm-hmm.
and they're just detaining him for a couple hours and then grilling you.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. I mean, it's the first and only time I've ever been in a police car, and I was terrified.
Wow.
Yeah. It was insane. It was
Wow.
absolutely insane. And, you know, I had to, I as complicated as it is, and as much as I wanted him to pay what he did, he wasn't born that way. People are not born pedophiles. They're created through their experiences, right? So I loved this guy. We loved each other since high school. We had an extremely tumultuous relationship. It's not that it was healthy at all, but I loved him and I cared about him. And I thought, well, in the foster care system, he got screwed and he got molested. And along the way, became into tremendous amounts of abuse. Not an excuse, not to excuse his behavior, but it informs why it happened. Right. And so now I'm like, okay, so now I'm backing up and I'm going, okay, so how do I help this situation in the best way possible for the best outcome? And so it was pick up the pieces along the way, because everything was shattered and on the ground, and it was just this messy puzzle, and I had no idea what the picture was supposed to look like. I did say to him, you need to plead guilty because we're not going through a trial. And he did, thankfully. So, and I don't, you know, it wasn't like I was pressuring him or threatening him in any way. It was just matter of fact. This is what's going to happen, and this is how it's going to happen. And it did, miraculously. But our system is so broken. He never did one night in jail, not one. And so he got 3 years probation. He got put on the registered sex offenders list, which is all fine and well, but there's no major consequence and a slap on the wrist for traumatizing and damaging a young child, a helpless child in their home. Ridiculous. Because, you know, there are so many other laws that are out there that are going to treat criminals as criminals. Mm-hmm. And in that system, it seems, and
that's literally one of the worst things you could ever do to someone.
Really, absolutely.
So, has he been a part of their lives?
Okay, so fast forward through that whole experience. You know, I felt obligated to remember that I have 3 children. At that point in time, I could discern that only one of them had been molested by him. And because of that, I got really good at holding space, because my youngest daughter was a daddy's girl. And when he left, she was so angry at me, and it became my fault. But of course, she's 6 years old. I can't say, well, your dad's, you know, it's not going to work. So I had to hold space for her. So I chose to do visitation with her and him, supervised by me. And until a point in time when she could comprehend and understand for herself and start asking questions for herself and decide for herself that she no longer wanted to stay.
Right. And that, I get it. I get it.
So that was about 12. So it was, you know, a number of years that I continued to, and it wasn't consistent at all, because he's not consistent at all, but it was in service to what all of my children needed, knowing that they all individually had an experience of the same experience. And because they have their own filter, their own DNA, their own personality, all of those things, it affected them differently. And so making, you know, room and honoring that each one of them had an experience of this same experience. Now, it was many years later in 2008 that my daughter, when she, you know, became pubescent and stuff, had a flash memory come back. Now, I had one of those when I turned 14, so I knew it intimately. And when she came to me, actually, it was her behavior went right left. Like, it was like a hard left. And I'm like, curiosity has me thinking, what's going on? There's something going on, and it's not what's on the surface. So what's underneath all of that? Mm-hmm. And when I finally sleuthed enough to, you know, to figure out, and she told me, I was like, oh my God. Okay, back to the police station we go. So back to the police station, another charge for her.
And this is a recent charge.
It was 2008. So this was His disclosure was 2003, so it's 5 years later.
Oh.
5 years later. He did do jail time that time. He got 12 months, a 12-month sentence. And I remember thinking, wow, 12 months of your life really isn't anything. We've just been locked in a pandemic, most of us locked in our houses and expected not to go anywhere or do anything for over a year now, right? So a year goes by that fast.
Yes,
so I was like, so fascinating to me. Again, here's my 14-year-old daughter stands up in court and just gives this absolutely incredible victim statement and puts him right in his place and says, your sorry means nothing to me because you had 5 years to figure this out and do something about this and you did nothing.
Right.
And so it was amazing and impactful. And, since that point in time, my kids are doing really well. So, at 24, 26, and 31, they're all in very stable, loving, kind relationships, probably what I can ascertain as their long-term forever relationships, which is amazing. They're all willing to do the work, so to speak. So go deep and dive deep and understand that they have had this experience in their lives to teach them something and to heal from and to attribute to stopping the lineage abuse that has been coming down for what I can tell is centuries.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. That is quite the story, Tanya.
Thank you.
So, having gone through all of that and, not that this is like a remedial way of explaining, but you turn to breaking the cycle, Siobhan says. And Carol says, wow, kudos for your strength.
Thank you.
And just the self-awareness or the awareness of, I'm going to fix this situation. We're going to be okay.
Yeah.
Is most likely one of the biggest reasons why your children are where they are today and not a product of what happened to them. And you're like, so is that what brought you to, I've got to like comedy as healing, using humor to heal? So
probably eventually,
okay.
at the time I was like, okay, so I can't see straight. I can't lift my head off a pillow. I've never felt this level of depression is one of those things.
Despair.
It's actually a physical thing, right? So I was heavy, like I was heavy hearted. I was heavy minded. I had blinders on. I couldn't really see what the picture was supposed to look like. I was terrified of everything and everybody. And I held it in for a long time because this man was very well loved by all of our friends and all of our family. And I thought, well, I'll just carry this for a while and not tell anyone the truth other than my mother and my sister. For the first year and a half, I didn't tell anyone. So people would call me and be concerned about him, and I'd be evasive. And I didn't want to put myself in situations where I was like, I'm lying by omission. So I just never went anywhere, did anything, right?
Right.
But it was like the feeding of my children. So what I could do, I can feed them. My fridge is very full. There's a roof over their head and I can feed them every day. We sit as a family for our meals and we talk about everything because everything's okay at our table. And it was super important to me that they understood that in talking about this, we're going to diminish the shame. We're going to diminish just the craziness, the crunchiness around all of that, because everybody else wants to go, I call them sphincter tightening moments, because it's like everybody goes,
I love that.
We shouldn't talk about that. It's shameful to talk about that. And
Oh,
I'm
right.
like, screw that. We are talking about this.
Yes.
And probably too much.
No, not too much. And that's what I was saying earlier to you before we got on, is like, there's no such thing as oversharing in my book, because this is what my show is all about, to get as real and raw and authentic and expansive and bring awareness to that which needs to be discussed. This past Sunday, I was, having dinner with my parents for Mother's Day, and my daddy was talking about something that he went through. This was before I was born, and he had never wanted to share that because I don't like to talk about negative stuff. But how do we grow? We have to learn so we can grow. And in order to learn, we need to talk, we need to discuss, we need to be made aware. So then we can, we can think and open our hearts to how to solve and move forward and evolve the situation, or evolve evolve the paradigm, shift the paradigm. So, shifting the paradigm around hiding, because there used to be a lot of shame, I guess, like I've heard in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s around mental health, and like, oh, she's crazy, they're crazy. And it was, now it's like every other commercial is about an antidepressant. It's because we're bringing that it is prevalent, and it is I don't like to say that we're like normal, but it exists. It's what?
It's an epidemic.
Yeah, an epidemic. And yeah.
So here's how I started to solve things for myself. It was like, okay, so Tanya, you have sexual abuse history in your family. These are things that were swept under the rug, never talked about. No one called the police. No one did anything about it. What are you going to do differently so that you have a different outcome? And it was like I felt responsible to always asking the question and remaining in curiosity around those things. And it wasn't easy because I was dealing with depression and anxiety and this terror of, walking in the world again. And it was through my dedication to every day, what I knew that I needed to do was laugh, cry, and learn.
Right.
So no word of a lie. At that point in time, I'd go to bed every night and I'd be like, oh God, you're such a loser. All you did today was watch Ellen, watch Oprah, watch Dr. Phil. What's wrong with you? What I've come to understand was it was all that I had the capacity for at that time.
The bandwidth. Exactly.
Totally. The bandwidth. I didn't have any more in me. And then years later, after repeating that daily, that ritual daily of laughing with Ellen, crying with Oprah, and learning with Dr. Phil before it became all Jerry Springer and everything.
Right. Good Lord.
Yeah. Years and years and years ago, it was almost 20 years ago now, right at the beginning. Yeah. And it was, understanding that eventually it was like, okay, you know what? I don't feel the need for that anymore. I feel like I need something else. What else do I need? And at that point in time, it was like, all right, so I want to step out there in the world again, but I'm a little scared. And I was doing lots of self-help programs. And so I would go and do a program, come back and sort of try to digest some of the things that I was uncovering. It was completely intentional healing so that I could heal myself and show my children how to do that. Yes. So it was like, here I am, the leader of this family. Who put me in charge? I have no idea, but here I am. And this is my responsibility. It's my job and my duty to be in service to my children. Now, at that point in time, working wasn't going to happen. I tried to have a job and do all of that stuff at the same time, and it nearly killed me. And so it was, how do I be at home? And so it was being inventive, right? And innovative. Yeah. So childcare, dog walking, car washing, you name it, whatever it took to figure it out. And leaning sometimes on some of the systems in place because I needed to at that point in time. It was necessary. I understood from the point of view of, I'm only one person. I only have this much to give, and I'm giving from an empty place. So I need to fill myself back up.
You can't pour from an empty cup.
Right. So taking care of myself to a degree, I never really learned self-care from anyone in particular. So it was like a relearning or reteaching of just about everything I've ever known. And about a year in, it was like, you know what? This isn't my burden. Why am I carrying this around? I don't want to keep this a secret. That's exactly what I want not to do. And I believe that things like that, they grow in the shadows. They're like mushrooms, right? They just grow and grow and grow in the shadows. They need the darkness. They need the dank, the damp, the shadowy parts in order to continue to grow. And I believe that's part of the problem and why we're seeing that historically through many families, some level of abuse, whether it be sexual, physical, emotional, it's all violence, right? So how do we turn this around and make lemonade out of lemons? So how do I do that? And so it's fitting, years later, I'm sitting on the side of the road in a lemonade stand, but we'll get to that in a minute. So, it was truly about the daily routines that were became the normal, right? So
Yep.
trying to normalize something that feels very unnormal and unnatural, eventually coming into a place in time where it was like, yes, we're going to talk this thing out. And I'm sure I know my kids at the dinner table were like, oh God, Mom, again, really? Why do we have, because I wanted them to be healthy sexual beings.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
trauma around sex and sexuality and all those things can re-traumatize over and over and over again.
It's like, it's like a domino effect.
Yes, into our adult lives. I'm like, okay, so I don't want that. What I do want is this, and I did it imperfectly. I did it absolutely imperfectly. If I had to do it all over again, I'd do it exactly the same way. So I have no major regrets around most of the choices that I made. And I see the byproduct of that in my children's lives, the way that they live them, the heart-centeredness that they have, the warmth and depth that they have is pretty amazing. I'm moved a lot by the fact that I was inspired to smile again because of them, because they would be outside playing and I'm like, wow, this is
I love that. Inspired to smile again.
Because I had lost my smile. I had lost my smile. I'd
lost your joy.
Lost most of my passion. Most of my joy. It stole my faith. It absolutely stole my faith and nearly obliterated my hope. But it was like my hope became this one grain of sand.
Yes.
And then that grain of sand turned into 2 and 3 and 4, and all of a sudden I had a beach again, right? But it took taking each grain of sand, which you know how tiny those are, right? Each grain of sand and adding them back to what I want my life to look like now.
Yes.
Not informed, but not controlled by what it has looked like in the past, right?
Exactly.
So I think that's an important distinction. And I'll say it again, I did it imperfectly along the way, but now, I see my kids and I see how well they're doing. And that to me is simply amazing. Now, being in service to them, head down, get this done, figure it out over the years. And all of a sudden, 15 years had gone by and it's like, whoa, hold on a second. And I could see the healing along the way. And they all, counseling was mandatory, even though my teenage son was like, I'm not saying anything. I'm like, okay, well, we'll just sit here and hold hands for an hour then. Yeah. But eventually he started talking, and eventually he started emoting, and eventually he started feeling. And bless him, I love this kid. He's an amazing light being. And he's had some pretty major trauma in his life. And it was eventually when he started doing his own self-development work, he really got the concept of you feel it to heal it. Like in order to heal something, you have to feel it.
Right.
So bless him, he went and got it tattooed on his body. It's right across his chest. I feel it to heal it.
Oh.
And he's covered in tatties because the only 2 things I ever forbid my son to do was to tattoo himself and to stretch his ears, both of which he did.
And pierce his ears?
Stretch. Gross.
Oh, with the big piercings? Oh. Yeah.
And so, and no offense to anyone who's watching.
I know. Yeah, exactly. No offense.
But as a mom, I was like mortified. And this is a teenage son that I want to, have control over, and I have zero control.
And that was his way of processing what he was dealing with internally. And I have to say this, and I certainly don't mean to cut you off, but I have such a celebration for you and such an admiration, a huge amount of respect that you took charge. Like there was something in you, Tanya, that said, I have to do, as even if it starts with 1 grain of sand to 2 grains of sand to 10,000 grains of sand, because I know so many people who haven't gone through near what you've persevered through. And the key thing is the self-development, the cultivation of self-awareness. And that is the main thing that I hit home on everything I do as a mindset coach is you got to cultivate that mindset. And that starts with your heart set. And that starts with knowing what you want and knowing why you want it. And you knew what you wanted, and you fervently, with every ounce of anything that exists in and around you, knew why. And that drove you to do whatever was necessary to create the harmony and the life that you belong to live, that every single human being on the planet deserves to be living in. But
Woo!
you got to start. Hooray!
Hooray!
But it's like it just takes that first step. Like and even binging the shows Oprah and Ellen and Dr. Phil, that was still your way of doing something than just flatten like a flounder, feeling sorry for yourself.
Well, and there was plenty of that. Don't get me wrong.
Well, yeah, I know that, but I'm just saying that we can feel that, and we have to feel.
Yeah.
But it's like, okay, but I don't want to stay here.
No.
How can I not stay here?
So it was about 5 years in, after just sort of this mind-numbing cycle of, okay, it just looks the same. It was like, okay, so when I went to program rooms, meaning when I went into self-development program rooms, I started to rebuild my trust, because there I could find men that I could trust. I was like, oh, there's a man that wants to do the work. Oh my God, he's beautiful. And when he shares, I see the humanity in him.
Yes.
I see what I desire to create in the world. And now I have another grain of sand. So I take a grain of sand and I add it to my beach. And every time that I left there feeling more healed, but more hope and more faith towards the world is a safe place, and I just need to learn how to navigate what feels unsafe at this point in time. Yeah. So it was this desire. Now, my kids were always in community theater, and I would sit in the audience and beam pride, that and there was a desire there that I didn't fulfill for myself. I was always living vicariously through them. And truth be told, it wasn't their passion. They didn't have a passion for it. And it was an after-school curricular activity that they could do. So bless them, they did it.
Yeah.
What came to me after about 5 years was, there's a musical coming up. It's Jesus Christ Superstar. Okay, here I am. Here's my debut. I'm going to step out into the world and figure this out. And I took to the stage and I sang my song, and they said, great, we want you as part of the, the background cast. And I played plenty of characters and sang my heart out. It was about a 9-month process. There was 100 people involved. So being around, going from home and not having anyone around, or just my children, and then going there in that situation and having all of these people around, it took my breath away a few times.
Yeah.
But when I stood on that stage, and I really understood that I'm not meant to be at home. I'm not meant to be unseen. I'm meant to be seen. I'm meant to be heard.
Yes.
And it was the first moment that I felt like it's okay to be seen. It's okay to be heard. And so I belted out those songs, and I was part of that ensemble cast, and it really changed my life. And from that point in time, I've stage managed, I co-directed, I produced some shows for their community theater. So I got heavily involved in that. Heavily involved in giving back to the self-development programs that I was, sort of connected with at that point in time, and understanding that my life in service is also not just about me and my healing. It's being in service to others about the things that I've learned.
Yes.
There's nothing better than a life in service, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
And if I die tomorrow, I know that I will have done everything that I possibly could up until this point in time to be in service to humanity, and that feels amazing. So it was community theater, Jesus Christ Superstar, eventually Rocky Horror Show, which was awesome.
Yeah,
awesome. And directing or co-directing Jack and the Beanstalk, a pantomime, and really getting involved with. And it took all of my time. Granted, I didn't have any sort of free time outside of that, but it was what I needed at that time. And then eventually, that was like, okay, so I've grown as much as I can here at this time. I need something new. So it was then moving that focus that once was the capacity of just being able to watch those 3 shows every day.
Right.
To now being heavily involved in theater, on their board, right in the thick of things and out there in the world, right? Yeah. Okay, what does life look like now? So eventually it was just my youngest daughter and I. And then she announced she was moving out. And I was like, moving out? Well, I always knew this would happen, but I didn't think it was now. Could you have given me, a couple of years notice? Like, we like each other. I think.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like, this works. Why are you going to leave? And it was, even though I knew, I guess, logically and in the back of my mind that it was eventually going to happen, I hadn't prepared for that.
Right.
And so I found myself in a bit of a tailspin at that point in time. I'm like, God, who am I if I'm not a mother? I've been a mother since I was 17 years old. I don't know how to do anything else in the world. And so it was great. And I was very proud of all my kids and moving on, and they're having their own lives and they're doing exceptional things. But then there was that moment of, well, but what about me?
Exactly.
What do I do now?
Yeah.
And so that was a bit of a tailspin. My son and his wife were living in Mexico at the time. And I was like, I don't know, I'm going to put all my stuff in storage and figure it out as I go. So I had a tiny bit of savings. I flew to Cancun. We drove in their Vocho across Mexico down the coast, got stopped every 5 minutes. It was insane.
So what is a Vocho?
Volkswagen. The Vita.
Oh, okay. Why were y'all getting stopped? Why were you getting stopped so much?
Well, I think that it was profiling, probably because we stuck out like sore thumbs. All of a sudden, this large white lady in a bug in the middle of Mexico. People were like, because we didn't do tourist things, right? We were in the thick of things. We stayed in people's homes. We ate with the families.
I love that.
Yeah, we explored.
You went where the people of Mexico live, not the resorts and where people are serving you.
These were dirt floors and no windows. Yeah.
I've seen,
and I was staying in a hammock, which was very interesting. The first time I went in, I went and landed on my head.
Yeah.
But I would have to swing my way out every morning. And I was having this really grand adventure, and I love my son and his wife. And it was, I had wanted to then spend about a month with them and then travel the world by myself. I was like, I'm going to do this by myself. And it was quickly that I changed my mind. I'm like, hang on a second. These two are a team. I wouldn't want to be out there on my own at this point in time. I don't feel sure enough of that. There was things that would come up where they would just know and they would work with each other and stuff. And I gained a lot of respect for both of them on that trip. And we had a ton of fun, but it was about a month in. We're sitting on a beach in San Pancho. I'm not a drinker, not heavily anyway. And it doesn't really interest me. And they're busy drinking beer every day on the beach and eating ceviche. So it was about a month in. I'm like, okay, my body hurts. I'm no longer having fun. The sunset is lovely, but the 32nd time, I'm just like, it's just not my thing, right? So coming to the understanding, okay, so if this isn't my thing, what is? Right. And I was clear after about 15 years of being single. Now, I had chosen to be single for about 10 of those 15 years. Because at the beginning, I was like, no revolving doors. No revolving door. Here's your new daddy. Here's your new daddy. I'm going to try and figure out my stuff while I'm trying to figure out your stuff.
Thank you. Wow.
It was like I had to close the door on that and say, I need to be healthier as a human being and as a woman to attract the kind of man that I would like to be in a relationship with. Because I know at this point in time, the men that I'm going to attract are unhealthy. And what my kids don't need is just that.
Girl, cold chills.
Close the door on that for a while. And again, it was intentional. But about 15 years in, I was like, wow, I'm lonely. And I see the relationship that these two have. And I think I'm ready. I think I'm ready for that. Okay. So it was come back to Canada, land on my daughter's couch. Now, my daughters were living together. So in a tiny little house where we couldn't even stand in the kitchen, all three of us at the same time. So someone would have to be sitting on the couch in order for the kitchen to work. And I felt like a loser, to be honest. I was like, wow, what a loser. Like, why I don't have my life together. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to do this thing called life because I've always been in service to them. And I didn't know how to balance that with figuring out my own stuff other than the healing part. Which was very important. But it was, I landed on their couch for a couple months. And then we decided that it was probably still beneficial to live together because I had a car and they didn't. And rent here in Vancouver is extraordinary. So it was like, okay, so how do we get ourselves into a situation? And let me tell you, the universe was literally waiting. It's like, I am waiting for this to happen because we got this house that I'm currently sitting in right now. September will be 4 years in September. And literally within a month of that happening, all three of us had boyfriends. my daughter ended up pregnant with my granddaughter. And so it was like, wow, life sure changed. It looked like this, and now it looks like
Now,
completely different.
yeah.
And coming to understand that it was necessary for us to have a bigger space in order to fit in all the stuff that was coming towards us. So, my granddaughter is the highlight of my life. And this morning she said, Gigi, can we dance? I was like, for sure we can. So we turned up the stereo, although everyone else in the house was sleeping. And we listened to Try Everything by Shakira. And it's in one of the kids' movies or whatever.
Yes.
And I just wept with her in my arms. And she goes, what's wrong? I said, nothing, absolutely nothing. It's all perfect. It's absolutely perfect. She is a divine light.
Yeah.
She's sassy as all get out.
Oh, I love it.
A huge personality, which is great.
I love it.
And so at the beginning of the pandemic, when they said the words, we're going to close down the world, I had just gotten back from my very first travel in Europe. We were there for a wedding, a family wedding. 11 of us went, 4 generations of my family. It had taken 20 years for that to happen. And when we landed in Europe, we were traveling during COVID, but we didn't know what it was, right? So it was something way off in the distance. We weren't listening to the news. As it turns out, we were in Spain 2 weeks before it shut down. My daughter was in Italy as it was shutting down. But again, we were out of touch with the reality around what COVID was going to be.
Right.
And so we got home after 35 days away, and my neighbor came running up. She's like, oh my God, I'm so glad you're home. I'm so glad you're safe. And they threw their arms around me. I'm like, okay, I don't know what's not safe, but okay. And it was the reality of, whoa, pardon? Italy shutting down. Martial law coming in. This is freaking me out. And my anxiety went through the roof. I was just like, people are going to be isolated. Mental health is going to skyrocket. What are we doing here? We are not doing right by what people are really going to need. We are wired for connection.
Yes.
Human beings are wired that way. So all of a sudden we're going to be disconnected. That didn't make sense to me. And I was in a bit of a tailspin again. And I thought, okay, well, what can I do? What will I do? What can I do? What will I do? And that's when I started my YouTube channel. And I started just doing daily videos. I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm going to just start talking and hopefully good stuff comes out. And I did 100 days. I did 111 days in a row of that. And then eventually it was like, okay, so this isn't, it was at one point in time really great. And now it doesn't feel so great. So it feels more like a chore. It's like when I go to bed, oh crap, I got to go and do that. Right. It wasn't. I get that. It wasn't as passion filled as it once was. And I was like, okay, it's still meaningful, but what do I want it to look like now? And it was shortly after that Hilarity, which Siobhan and I both are core volunteers and comedians with Hilarity. Mm-hmm. Well, we're outside of Hilarity as well, but we're connected to Hilarity and are in service to the work that they do there, which is comedy therapy, right? Therapeutic comedy, which I really believe in.
Yes, absolutely.
And I believe that, most of my healing, if it weren't for laughter, I would have cried and I would have died. And I don't say that lightly, right? Like if it wasn't for the ability to laugh and be ridiculous and say ridiculous things and just have some fun with life, it wouldn't be worth living. So,
right.
It was like my happy funny bone, right? So having to really strengthen that muscle by repeating what works. So it was back in, at the beginning of the pandemic when everything was shutting down, I was like, okay. So how am I going to be in service at this point in time? Because my anxiety is telling me the world is unsafe because I'm now back 18 years ago where I was, I'm frozen and I can't breathe properly. And now it was Lucy, who is a character from Peanuts, Charlie Brown.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
And she came to me in a very vivid dream. It was very HD, if you will. It was very realistic, very vivid and colorful. And she showed me her psychiatry stand. And it was like a communication through telepathic. It wasn't a conversation, right? So it was like she showed me this psychiatry stand, and then it was I was supposed to become the sit-down stand-up comedian. Yeah. And I woke up thinking, oh my God, that's so crazy. Like, I should never tell anyone about this.
And now she's telling the
Right?
world.
And then my mom called me, like literally about 3 minutes later. I'm like, oh my God, listen to this. This is so crazy. And she's like, I think it's perfect, and I think you should do it. And I was like, no, it's so hilarious. And if it
It's
weren't
amazing how we talk ourselves out of
for
things, even when we have this intuitive guidance that that's right where we should be.
And so thankfully, my mom saying that, but it was Hilarities. We got hired to do commission, not hired, because there's no money in comedy. Not for me yet, anyway.
Yet.
That isn't true, and I'll say yet. I have been paid to do comedy, so yes, there's money. I just haven't seen a lot of it yet. So the Comedy Stand pays me about 12 cents an hour, and it pays me in dividends so much more than that.
Right.
So it was Hilarity was going to do a Canada Day celebration. So Canada Day is July 1st. Yours is July 4th in the States, right? So we're celebrating Canada Day, and we're going to do this scene. So we're going to do a newscast from the Comedy Stand. So I'm going to do a 5-minute thing. So we built like a lemonade. My boyfriend built me a lemonade stand.
Oh, I love it.
And we made the sign, and my son, my son-in-law, because I put sit down, stand up comedian on the sign, and then he crossed it out in red and put sit down, because that was the shtick, if you will.
Yeah.
And it was the first time that I pushed that little cart out, and I can hear the wheels on the uneven pavement, and I'm like, what the bloody hell do you think you're doing? You're going to look so stupid. People are going to think you're foolish. And it was terrifying. And if it wasn't for my boyfriend actually pushing it out there, I might not have done it, because I was like, I'm really attached to my self-worth at that point in time, being attached to what people think of me.
Right.
And so I was like, I don't know how to do this, but I know that I have to do this because there are people that are suffering, they're isolated, and they cannot be alone right now. So it was my attempt at being Ellen and giving back, to something that was really a treasured gift of mine for so long, because it was all I could do in a day. And I thought, well, if I can be in service to someone at this point in time, anyone. And I remember years ago at Toastmasters, someone said, well, if one person gets what they need from what you say, is that enough?
Thank you.
And I had to think about it for a minute, because of course I dream of big stages.
Yeah, of course.
And I was like, you know what? Yes, it is, because that's how the ripple effect happens, right? Yes. So if I touch one person, then they touch one person, and it expands from there. And so, I pushed out my cart, and I did the thing for Hilarity, and we got onto the White Rock, Canada Day show. And I thought, okay, there's something to this. It feeds me, which is a good thing, because being isolated in my house is not good for me either.
Right.
And I'm desperate not to go back to those dark waters. And I know that it's this close. And so how can I be in service to what's needed out there in the world without having to leave my house effectively? It's in my front yard. And I went out there, and I started the journey of, and then immediately, Stephanie, I went, oh my God, I can do this. Monday, Wednesday, Friday. That's it. I'm here. I'm going to do this full time. It's going to be my goal. This is my thing. And then this small, still voice inside of me said, no, think again. What can you give without taking from yourself?
Oh, God, guys, that's a quotable moment. What can you give without taking from yourself?
Because I am all about being in service, but at what cost? At what cost?
Mm-hmm.
And so it became clearer at that point in time that Tuesdays and Thursdays were what I could give. I could give 2 days a week. And I could give 2 hours in those 2 days to sit there on the side of the road, looking foolish, waving my fool face off. And it was my good friend Stacy who said to me, how are you going to detach your self-worth from the people who do not see you and do not wave at you? And I went, ugh. Oh, that's a lot. I don't know, because honestly, as they're driving by, I'm going, oh, that person didn't wave, and that person didn't wave. And I could feel myself deflating in that moment. I'm like, okay,
because Tanya,
yeah.
so everybody has that worried about what other people think. So they're worried about what you think about them
thinking.
acknowledging you, about them acknowledging you. And I have a saying, live your life caring what other people think, and you're their prisoner. How
Yes.
does it feel? It feels like a prison to not be able to just be authentic. And
Love,
100%.
love, love. And so
God, I want
it's
to
a
write that down.
practice. And here's the thing. It's not a light switch, right?
Right.
It's
Yeah,
a
yeah, yeah.
practice. It's not on or off. It's a practice of, because I'll sit out there on Tuesdays and Thursdays and people will drive by. And a lot of people right now, what I'm empathically picking up is that people are stretched. It's not that they can't see me. They can't see anything other than
Yeah.
the race to get where they're going, the white knuckles on their steering wheel, because they're so stretched and they don't know how to, they don't have the capacity at this point in time
Yep.
to really understand what's going on with them. Part of their actual brain has stopped working as a whole in humanity right now because we're being traumatized. So a part of our brain protects us by shutting down. And so we're available for flight, fright,
Fight, flight,
or
freeze.
freeze. Yeah.
Yes.
So, so we're in that mode of, but the people who can see me, it's amazing. It's amazing. So,
Oh, yeah.
even, I'm here. I'll show you a picture of what it looks like for those who don't know what it looks like. It's literally a glorified lemonade stand. This is my house that's in behind, and here's me with my Pez laughter. When I laugh, it just erupts out of me.
Yeah.
And so I sit at the comedy stand in service, and the people who can see me. So I've talked to hundreds of people. I've been there 10 months. And it was back in November that CBC, which is a local radio station here across Canada, they called me and said, well, we want to do a radio interview. I'm like, okay, that sounds great. Thank you. And when he came, I was like, oh,
I remember that.
I was about to go in for the winter. And now I think that I can't, allow the traction that this feels like it's getting finally after so many months. And I think that in the winter is probably the darkest time for people. So I need to
Yeah.
be out there. So we built a little bit of a bigger stand so that I could be out there in the winter. Thankfully, we don't have that much snow here in Vancouver.
Yeah.
I've missed only a handful of days.
And you wrapped up real good.
I did. I had a heater underneath my desk, and then people stood outside there and listening to my comedy. At first it was like, go and do your stand-up routine at the comedy stand and make people laugh, which is great. And I love that part of it. But it really is about human connection,
Yeah.
because I remember this one, I call him a kid. He's got to be 24, 25 years old. And I love him and we're friends now. But I mean, he came up and he was visibly upset and really not okay. I could really sense that he wasn't okay. And he's like, what is this? And I was like, well, what do you want it to be? I'm here for whatever you need.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then he dumped. And it was heavy. And it was so perfect because it was so tied into my story. He has no clue. I'm sitting here on the side of the road saying I'm a stand-up comedian. He has no idea of my history.
Right.
But what he's dumping at my feet is exactly what I need to hear. And we cried together, even though he was physically, whatever, the 6'10" feet away. And we held each other with our eye contact. And there was something that transpired there that was so magical because it wasn't the rescue, run up and rescue like we do, right?
Yeah.
Let me hug away the feelings. We just stood in the feelings of it all.
Wow.
And we stood there for a long time. And he eventually came and laid his head on my comedy stand, and I just touched his head and I said, you have no idea the gift you've just given me today. And since that point in time, the TV has now shown up. So Vancouver is Awesome is a local paper. They came and did an interview and a bit of a video and showed that. And then Mike McCarthy is one of our longtime feel-good story guys. He's been doing stories on TV for 44 years. And so when he walks up to the comedy stand, I'm like, wow, I'm in comedy, or I'm in royalty. He really is heart-centered. He cares about people. And we had this connection. So when he looked me in the eye, he was like, wow, you're pretty amazing. I said, I see that in you as well. Because if you spot it, you got it.
Absolutely.
And so we had this marvelous interaction. And then they put me on the end of the news on CTV here in Canada. And then fast forward a couple months later, global TV showed up. So it got bigger. And as my friend Phil Park says, there's no one higher than Squire. So Squire Barnes is an announcer for Global TV. He's a sports guy usually. And they did a whole expose on the Comedy Stand, and they ran it all the way through the news, little excerpts all the way through the news. And then at the end, they had Lucy at her psychiatry stand voicing my words, saying, build it and they will come. And it certainly has. It's been an amazing and incredible experience. My intention is to stay there as long as possible. Someone did report me to the city, and they came and investigated. Excuse me. And I remember in the immediacy of that, I was like, are you freaking kidding me? Like, really? Like, I'm spreading joy. Why would you be opposed to this? I could not wrap my head around it. And then
miserable haters, girl.
And exactly that. And then I was like, wow, if someone is that devoid of joy, that they cannot see what I'm doing,
right,
then I make room and find some compassion in me and grow that compassion, because those people need the love more. So I could have stood in anger and I could have been resentful, and I did for a moment in time, but it's always in the realm of, okay, but why is this happening? Not that it is happening. Why is it happening?
Why? Right.
So
Thank you.
What about their lives has informed them to the degree where all they can be is angry and resentful?
Yes.
And so I give them a big old Care Bear stare, and I say, like, I'm going to send so much love to you.
Yes.
Eventually, it's going to put a crack in that armor.
Yes.
And some of that's going to let the love in, and then the light gets to come out.
You want to process the anger, and of course, I mean, it's part of your emotions. That's normal, but the way in which you know what to then project, because what you project, you receive like a boomerang, and you know that you want to feel joy, you want to feel elated excitement, happiness, peace, and freedom. So you want to wish that for even your worst enemy.
Absolutely.
Because your worst enemy is in pain. Hurt people hurt people. Happy people don't.
They sure do. And we have something here in Vancouver called the Downtown Eastside. I'm sure that you have a version of it in your cities, right, in the States, of homeless population and stuff, right?
Yes.
So my ex-husband lives on the Downtown Eastside, which is about 6 minutes from my house. And so when I'm driving down there and I see him, I actually grow my compassion, because the things that he does to himself are far worse than the things I could ever think. And I've always been okay that everyone have their own opinion about that, because my mom's like, hurt him, and rightfully so, because he hurt my children.
Right.
That piece. And I'm also understanding that it had to be someone that I loved so intensely, because if it was a soccer coach or an uncle or whatever, it would have looked very different, because I wouldn't have had that bond, and it would have been easy to just sit in hate and resentment. And what I have found is that through, coming to understand that, again, he was not born that way. It was something that happened to him that he never knew how to deal with. Right. And not to negate his responsibility, because he was a functioning adult, had, the wherewithal to choose differently.
The capacity to choose. Yes,
absolutely. And so both of those things can exist at the same time.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so, it's not one or the other. And I try and distance everything and try and look at it from the point of view of, okay, so both of these things exist. How do I make room for both of them to exist without them being at war? Because I think quite easily that happens, right? So, but I am very thankful for the opportunities that I've been given this year as a result of the Comedy Stand, right? All of a sudden, I'm being asked to do comedy outside of Hilarity, outside there in the real world, which is very scary to me. And people are recognizing me. So when I got out of the car recently, somebody did an elbow to, their pal, and they were like, I was like, oh my God. It's just so strange to me, because notoriety seems scary, because with notoriety and and love and adoration also comes the flip side of that coin, which
Oh,
is
yeah.
scrutiny and anger
Yep.
and resentment and all that kind of
Mm.
stuff. So, and I don't know that I signed up and was ready for it, other than the universe obviously thought that I was, because here I am.
Yep.
Now, the lady at CBC who's deemed me the street therapist, which I really loved. As soon as she said it, I was like, yes, I'm the street therapist. That is so cool.
Yeah.
I'll be the street therapist at the Comedy Stand, no problem. And I've had so many cool opportunities happen. So I'm on something called The Chat with a bunch of ladies, where we sit
I've seen
around
it.
and ask, a question is asked, and then we sort of debate or give feedback to our answer on these questions. It's fairly new, and being seen on there is very interesting too, because I quite often sit back and just listen, and my opinions or my insights are often very different or opposite to what the sort of mainstream of everything is. So I'm finding my footing there and trying to get get how that's going to work. I became a published author in a book called Pursuit 365 with my friend Siobhan.
I ordered my copy, and it's not here yet.
Okay, well, just wait.
Ordered it like a month ago.
Oh my goodness! Come on, people, get on with it.
Yeah.
It's a fabulous book. It's actually extremely heavy and beautifully done. And it's 365 Canadian women standing up and saying, hey, you know what? I'm making a difference in this area of my life. Here's maybe how you could do the same. Because it's very inspiring to read those stories and think, yes, I want to be a part of this. And proximity is power, right? So if I'm in proximity with powerful people, I am empowered.
Thank you.
Yes, to show up in a different way. So, and when you and Siobhan first started your show, Siobhan and I have talked about this many times, about the ego twinge, right? The oh my God, well, I'm so happy for her. When I want to be happy, but there's a part of me that's like, not fair. How come blah, blah, blah. And it was in the understanding that nothing will pass me by that's meant for me.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you right now, I think you are a genius. Like, I ain't just saying that shit. I mean, like, what the mindset that you have and have had and still have, and what you've created through yourself, created through yourself and your heart. Wow.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. I do know that you came to my Roar comedy.
Yes, girl.
Now,
I was.
and it
we're all bawling.
It wasn't for hilarity, and I knew that I needed to do some work outside of that forum. And so when Roar came along and Siobhan connected all the, Siobhan the connector there,
Yes.
connected all the dots, it was like, I know that I need to take a step in this direction, because I have so much shame. I have body shame. I have sex shame. I have so much shame. And I want to dive into that deep pool. And so I need to learn how to do that. And Pasha did an excellent job at helping me to realize that. And it was, a couple people came to that show from my family and my friends. I posted, and of course people are like, oh, comedy, right on. What I should have prefaced it with was, it's raw.
Oh yeah.
Therapeutic. And so it's not going to be for everyone, because that form of comedy is not for everyone. It's not something that I could take the yucks and do 12 minutes on the stage, right? Which I've done. And I loved that piece. But there's something about the transpersonal experience that I have when I'm able to get down into the grit of all of it, because it's gritty. Yep. And why would I want to have this fallacy that it's fake and fine and everything's wonderful and let's just laugh? Because that's surface, and that's not where I live, and it's not where I desire to live. I want to go deep. And
thank you.
My experience is that when I show up vulnerably, it's like a domino effect. People catch the insight of, wow, I didn't realize that it was okay to show up.
That is when I decided, I'm like, I got to have her on Empowered Conversation.
Nice.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Well, which was such a great moment, because I remember when you and Siobhan started your cooking show, I was like, well, good for them. I'm so happy for them. I want to have you on too. But I also have come to understand that that everything's in perfect order.
Yep.
Even though it feels like chaos, and it's not, from the visible eye. And then when you reached out and said, hey, would you want to? I was ready then. I wasn't ready back there.
Right.
Right. I wasn't prepared. And so I've been preparing, which is
I get it.
awesome. And now, an hour and a bit later, I see here we are. We've had a really empowered conversation. And I love the service work that you do for the world, Stephanie. Thank you for having a forum available to create empowered conversations. I think it's so vital and so important. And I feel very honored to have been a guest here this morning.
Thank you. And I feel so honored to have had you on my show.
Thank you.
Wow.
Woo!
Guys, yeah, this has been very emotional. And again, thank you so much for coming on and sharing, being so vulnerable and sharing things with people. Like, you never know who's going to be watching this on the replay. I think I know who all's on here right now, but it's like, who needs to see this will see it.
Yep.
And who it needs to resonate and maybe spark something within, it will.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's just one person, I mean, even if it's just one person, you have done, yeah.
It's very heart-centered.
It's very, yeah.
Very heart-centered.
Very,
it's what I know how to do. I've been practicing for a long time. It's like a muscle, right? So, and at some point in time, it was atrophied, and I didn't know that I could ever rebuild it. And then eventually, it became stronger and stronger and stronger. And now it's just out there beaming its light. And and for anybody that's thinking, oh, well, I couldn't do that or I couldn't do that. People came to that comedy show at Roar and they were like, oh, that was not really that funny. It was kind of edgy. And my sister said to me, it was kind of angry. And I was like, good. I'm glad that came across. I'm pissed off. I'm glad that came across. And so, and I said, and I'm sorry you didn't enjoy that album. Stay tuned for the next one. Because realistically, my comedy is not about you.
Exactly.
My comedy journey is about me and trying to sort through and wade through some of the stuff in order to bring the funny to the surface and then maybe give back in a way so that we can, everyone has shame. Everyone has trauma, right? No one escapes this thing without those two things. And many things more than that, but those two things for sure. And so how can I give other people permission just by being my truest and most authentic, genuine self? And so that's all I know how to do in the world. Absolutely. And there are parts of me that show up angry sometimes. And there are parts of me in traffic that are not so compassionate.
Oh, yeah. I can be a crazy ass.
I'm all of those things and more, right? Yes.
Absolutely.
And I want to marry the light with the darkness because the darkness is a real thing. It's real.
Yeah. Right.
Real. Raw and real. That's
raw and frickin' real. Y'all, this is wow. Guys, for those, thank you again for those that have been on and joined us live and all the comments. And for those that will be watching this, it doesn't matter what you've been through. If you say enough is enough, I want more, there has to be more, there has to be something greater, you can find it. It's mindset. Everything is mindset, whether you think you can or whether you think you can't.
You're right.
Either way, you're right. And here is a beautiful human being who said, not on my watch. And I'm creating my life. Yeah.
With a whole lot of laughter because
with laughter. Yeah, exactly. I'm addicted. I'm addicted to, my antennas are always joy and laughter, but it doesn't mean that my life is always joy and laughter.
Agreed.
But that's where my antennas are always just or where I'm tuning, where my radio's tuned to.
Yes.
And well, guys, thank you again so much, Tanya, and follow her. I don't know if there were links. I want, please share every way that people are able to see you. Your YouTube channel. Please put that in the comments when I end when I end this. Guys, tomorrow join Siobhan and I for food therapy. We're going to be making my delicious chicken piccata. Actually, Siobhan's going to do, I think she's going to do deep fried tofu. That's going to be equally as amazing. I've made it that way. I'm so super excited. And thank you again for joining for another episode of Empowered Conversations. And you stay right here, Tanya. I'm just going to say goodbye to everybody.
Hey.
All right, guys. Yeah, thank you. Siobhan says, thank you. Sit down, stand-up comedian, follow here. So hopefully she's put in a link.
Cool. Right on. Thank you.
Yes. All right, guys.
Thanks,
Bye, everyone. We'll see you next week. Same time, same bat channel. Heart-centered.